In 1995, I unknowingly invited the Hat Man into my house. Welcome to Vibration State. I'm Jason Dale. In part one of this story, I told you about the night I first became aware of the Hat Man back in 1994. It was the night when my best friend Ruben saw the Hat Man while riding as a passenger in my car. It was in that moment that he realized the Hat Man had just followed him over 1,000 miles from California to Colorado. Since I didn't see the Hat Man for myself that night, I didn't know what to believe. So make sure you listen to part one of the story if you haven't already. Welcome to early 1995. I was now halfway through my junior year of high school. My best friend Ruben had dropped out of school shortly before the end of the first semester. Because of this, I hadn't seen much of Ruben in the last few months. And as mentioned in part one, Ruben lived with his aunt and uncle. Well, one day around the end of February, Ruben calls me on the phone and tells me that his aunt and uncle had just kicked him out of their house. He asked if he could stay at my house for a while until he figures out a more permanent place to live. I tell him I'll talk to my dad and see what I can do for him. Now, my parents had recently gone through a divorce, so my younger brother and I, we lived with our dad. Ruben and my dad knew each other since they would always talk whenever Ruben was over at our house. So I asked my dad, and he's willing to let Ruben stay with us for a few months as long as Ruben finds a job since he's no longer in school. Ruben's fine with this, and he immediately finds a job working at a car dealership that's within walking distance from my house. So the first night he stays at my house, we get him set up in the family room, which is down in the basement next to my bedroom. We have a couch down there that also converts into a bed that Ruben can sleep on, but Ruben tells us that he prefers to sleep on the floor. It was a school night for me, so we went to bed at a decent hour. I fall asleep quickly, but at some point in the middle of the night, something startles me awake. I feel the presence of someone standing next to my bed. I wait a moment for my eyes to adjust to the darkness. I'm thinking it's probably just Ruben. Maybe he needs some more blankets or something. My eyes finally adjust to the dark, but I don't see anyone in the room. I'm confused because I still feel the presence of someone. So I listen for any movement, but it's totally quiet. Not just in my room, but throughout the basement and the rest of the house. The only thing I can hear is the sound of my own heartbeat and my own breathing. Feels like adrenaline is running through my body, and it feels like all the hair on my body is standing up. I'm wondering, why without any evidence am I so convinced that someone is here in the room with me? After about 5 to 10 minutes of silence, I decide to finally ignore this irrational fear and try to go back to sleep. But every time I start to drift asleep, I'm jolted right out of this into a state of panic. I decide to silently pray in my head, asking God to remove the presence in my room, or at least remove my fear. But to my surprise, no matter how long and how hard I pray, the intensity of this unseen force only seems to get stronger. Now I'm almost feeling paralyzed with fear. Looking at the clock, I realize it's been about 45 minutes since I had first woken up. If I want to get any sleep tonight, I need to get out of this room and try to sleep upstairs in the living room. Well, it takes me at least 5 minutes just to get up the courage to get out of bed. I grab my pillow and the comforter off the bed, and I bolt out of the room. I glance over at Ruben lying on the floor in the family room, and he's out cold in a deep sleep. Nothing unusual. So I rush up the stairs, and I immediately feel better once I get up into the living room. By comparison, it's so much more peaceful being on the couch in the living room, so I'm able to fall asleep quickly. About an hour or so later, I'm suddenly startled awake, but this time is different. I'm completely paralyzed. I can't feel my body. All I can do is just look at whatever's in front of my face. I sleep on my side and can see the living room as it appears from my position on the couch, but I don't see anything unusual. I feel the presence as strong as ever, but somehow I can sense that it's coming from down in the basement. All of a sudden, I feel my body being pulled off of the couch. Now I'm in a state of panic. I'm trying to scream as loud as I can for my dad in hopes that I can wake him up, but no sound is actually coming out of my mouth. My body is now hovering about 2 feet above the floor in a parallel manner. I continue trying to scream, but I can't. All I can do is just helplessly look around the room as my body is slowly being pulled toward the stairs. As I'm pulled to the top of the stairwell, I can see 2 bright red glowing lights down in the basement. These lights are not normal and they shouldn't be there. I'm still trying to scream and break free, but I can't. My body is now just being suspended at the top of the stairs with my field of view facing down into the basement. I'm somewhat relieved that I'm not being pulled down into the basement, but I suddenly realize that the glowing red lights are actually eyes of a tall, shadowy figure that is standing at the base of the stairs. At this point, I'm internally screaming for God to help me. Nothing happens, except I feel what I would describe as a slow oscillation of energy coming from this entity. The best way I can describe it, it's like slow waves of pure evil and fear that are just paralyzing my body. So I'm stuck here looking at this entity, and even though it doesn't use words to communicate, it suddenly becomes clear to me that this entity wants me to know that Ruben belongs to him. And as soon as I understand this message, I suddenly break free, and in a blink of an eye, I find myself back on the couch underneath my comforter. All the fear is completely gone, just like that. I look around the room, and everything appears exactly as it did moments before when I was being dragged off the couch. Shadows coming from the light through the living room window looks exactly the same. So I'm laying there and I'm thinking about what had just happened. This entity had pulled my consciousness out of my physical body to reveal itself to me and tell me that Ruben belongs to him. So I'm remembering what happened about 4 to 5 months ago when Ruben saw the Hat Man standing on the side of the road as we drove past. Ruben had described him to me as a tall, shadowy figure of a man, sometimes with glowing red eyes. The entity that I saw fit the description, but I had been in such a state of panic, I only focused on the glowing red eyes. It was so dark I didn't pay attention to any other features of this entity. But I had no doubt I just saw the Hat Man. I knew that as long as Ruben was staying with us, the Hat Man would be in our house. But I was able to go back to sleep without any problem for the rest of the night. And the next morning, Ruben noticed that I had slept on the couch in the living room. And with a smile on his face, he asked me, "Did you see something last night?" I didn't really want to talk about it, so I just decided to play it off. No, I just had a hard time sleeping, that's all. And he just smiled again and didn't question it any further, but I feel like somehow he knew that I saw the Hat Man. So every night after that, I slept on the couch upstairs while Ruben was at our house. My dad and my brother thought I was just doing it just to give Ruben more space in the basement. During the time that Ruben stayed at our house, I really became aware of just how far apart Ruben and I were from each other. We didn't really hang out at all during this time period. But there was one more really strange incident that happened before Ruben moved out of my house. I'm going to talk about it in part 3 of the story in the next episode. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.